B'Dvach Shvatov, we are learning Lila Nishmas Mindel Mariam Kalman Ruven Harishamash Aliyah. Yesterday we discussed cleaning off shoes. Keep in mind, back in the day, their shoes would get their whole street. Their streets were so muddy, and so scraping off your shoes, scraping off your clothing, those are things which are going to be quite common. And so over here we get into discussion about how, if and how you're able to scrape off the mud from your shoes. Amar Ravo, Amar Blazer, Amar Yanai, Megarin, Minal Chadash, Vel Yashin. You're allowed to scrape clay off of a new shoe, but not an old shoe. What's the difference? If you scrape it off a new shoe, it's not going to smooth. It's very fresh, and therefore, if scraping it off, it's not going to make it smooth. But if you scrape it off an old shoe, you're going to be in violation of a biblical prohibition called memachik, of smoothing something out. Okay, now we're kofim aleph on the base, the mem megaro, and with what are you allowed to scrape this new shoe? Amar Ravo, begav sakin, with the back of a knife. Doing it with the front of a knife, it's going to really smoothen it out. But if you do the back of a knife, then it's not going to really make it smooth because of it's not so sharp. Okay. However, this certain elder came to Ravo and said, delete your ruling, ignore your ruling in favor of the ruling that's found in a brisa top Rav Chia. Okay, so this was a ruling by an Amora, and now we're saying this elder came along and said, wait, there's a brisa, there's a more primary source which has a ruling which contradicts this, and therefore ignore the teaching that you just shared. What's the original ruling? Not to scrape neither a new shoe or an old shoe. No scraping of shoes at all. And so, right, so basically any type of scraping on a new shoe or old shoe, back of a knife, front of a knife, all that is usher. You're not allowed to scrape a shoe on anything metal. There's actually a discussion about scraping our shoes on if it's a leather shoe, on a floor mat that's made of metal. In some like industrial places you have that too. Typical home is going to have something a little less intense, like rubber or material, but to use metal and scraping your foot on that could be problematic. Okay, now we go, the brisa continues. We're going to discuss the rest of the brisa in a moment. You're not allowed to anoint your foot with oil while it's inside a shoe or a sandal. Okay, so there's no issue of putting oil on your body, however, on Shabbos. However, putting in it while it's in your shoe or sandal, the issue is that you're not allowed to pour oil, as we'll see, you're not allowed to pour oil onto a shoe or sandal because it's part of the tanning process, and tanning is one of the 39 prohibitions. So you're not allowed to anoint your foot with oil while your foot is in a shoe, because then you are, even though it's not direct, it's coming off your shoe, but you were doing a form of tanning, and therefore, at the very least, it's going to be asur midrabanan. But you're allowed to anoint your foot with oil, and then place it in the shoe, in the sandal, or in the shoe or in the sandal. In other words, put the oil first on your foot, and then you place your foot into the shoe or the sandal. That's indirect enough that that's not going to be a problem. And you're allowed to anoint your entire body with oil, then roll around atop a leather sheet. And again, same idea. There is no concern of tanning in such a case because of its indirect fashion. Rav Chisda comes along and says, this allowance of indirectly pouring oil onto a shoe is only in a case when your intent was to polish it. Now, polish doesn't mean polish like we mean polish, like to make a black shoe black or something like that. That's usher for a whole bunch of reasons. But we're talking about polishing, meaning giving a certain shine with oil. So it's allowed if your intention is only to polish it. Abdo usher, but if your intention is to tan it, even if it's indirect, it's still going to be usher. Ask the Gemara, Abdo Pshita, if your intention is to tan it, it's for sure going to be asur. Even if you're doing it in indirect fashion, at the very least, it'll be asur d'Rabbanan. And furthermore, even doing it to polish should also be asur. And therefore, the Gemara ultimately comes along and says, Rav Chisda, the statement we just said from Rav Chisda, we misunderstood it, we misheard it, and we're going to reinterpret or present a new version of what Rav Chisda actually said. If Rav Chisda made a qualification, this is what he meant to say. Rav Chisda says, Rav Chisda lo shanu ela shiur l'tachtecho. What Rav Chisda allowed was the following. The brisa said, I'm allowed to pour oil on my foot and then put my foot in a shoe. This is only allowed if it's a small amount of oil, the amount of oil that's needed to polish. That's a small amount. But if you put a lot of it, even if your intention is just to, put oil on your foot, like you're just doing it for comfort reason or something like that, your intention is not to tan, not to polish, your intention is for nothing other than yourself. But since you're putting the amount that's normally needed for tanning, it's going to be prohibited. So again, initially we understood Rav Chisda to be talking about intention, and now we're saying it's nothing to do with intention, it's more about the shear, the amount. Okay, Tanar Rabbanan. Now we move on to we discussed some things about shoes, but as it relates to carrying. Tanar Rabbanan was talking about Brisa, a small person should not go out into a public domain wearing a large size shoe. Why? Because the shoe may fall off and the child's going to go ahead, or this small person is going to go out and carry the large shoe, right? If a large shoe could fall off. But you're allowed to go out wearing a large shirt. So you're allowed to wear a shirt that's much too large because, first of all, it's unlikely it's going to fall off if it's very large, even if it's very large, and B, even if it falls off, you're not going to walk around without a shirt on. You're going to put the shirt back on, and therefore it's permitted. So it says the Brisa further, "V'lo isha b'minal merupat." A woman's not allowed to go out wearing a torn shoe. Why not? It fits. The problem is that if it's a torn shoe, there's a chance that she might be embarrassed and she might take it off. Like she'll see some friends, she'll see some people who might judge her, whatever it is, and she'll take them off and carry them and come to carrying. So therefore, you're not allowed to wear a torn shoe. And then once we're mentioning torn shoes, she's not supposed to do chalitza, right? The whole process of hibum. So you're not the disengagement, the separation between this woman and her brother-in-law is done by spitting into a shoe, and it has to be a very particular shoe. That should not be done with a torn shoe. However, if it was done, it is a valid chalitza. Okay, then yonsin b'min al chadash. You're not allowed to go out with a brand new shoe on Shabbos. Okay, be'ezeh min al amr. The Brisa concludes by saying which type of shoe are you not allowed to wear brand new? But minal shel isha, this is a woman's shoe. What's the rationale over here is similar to the one before, and that is that if you put on new shoes, the first time, they might not fit well, and they may be too tight, they may be too small, too large, whatever it is, and therefore a woman, specifically, we're concerned more with the woman that she's going to take them off because they don't fit so well. With men, apparently, they weren't as concerned about wearing shoes that fit, and therefore a man is allowed to wear a brand new shoe, a woman would not be allowed to be a brand new shoe, wear a brand new shoe on Shabbos without an Erev, because there's a concern she might take it off if it doesn't fit. Tani Bar Kapar qualifies this further, and he says, this was only taught if the woman never went out, never wore the shoe at all before Shabbos. As long as she wore it a little bit before Shabbos began, then it is permitted. Okay, once we're talking about shoes, we're going to teach two contradictory teachings about shoes and Shabbos. Tani Chad was taught in one brisa. Shomtin minal nalgabe imus. You're allowed to slip a shoe off of a shoe tree, right? A shoe tree or a shoe form. Basically, the way they made shoes back in the day, maybe they still do now. I have no idea how shoes are made, but okay, basically they took leather and they would have a form, like similar to a shoe tree, which holds your shoes up, right? They'd have form, they put it on that form, they leave it there for a while till it gets nice and strong and nice and firm, and then they take it off of this tree on Shabbos. So let's think about the different pieces over here. So the shoe, it's in the process of making a shoe, and this contraption is part of the building process of a shoe. So in one brisa it says you're allowed to slip the shoe off the shoe form on Shabbos, right? So you have a new pair of shoes, they're being made on this shoe form, a shoe tree, and then on Shabbos say, I want to wear those shoes. You take them off on Shabbos, no problem. The tiny idach, another brisa taught, ain't shomtin, you're not allowed to do so. So it's a contradiction. The Gemara says no problem, no kasha, no contradiction. Har Eliezer, har Rabbanan. The one brisa that says, right, one brisa is the Rabbi Eliezer that says Aser, one brisa is Rabbanan. Titnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Minol shal gabi imos, regarding a shoe that's on a shoe form, Rabbi Eliezer metaher, v'chacham metamim. If this shoe comes into contact with a sheretz, let's say, something which would make it tameh, so Rabbi Eliezer says it is tahar, okay, and the Chum say it is tameh. What's the machlokas about? Rabbi Eliezer says as long as a shoe is on this shoe tree, it is not yet a kli. It's not yet a utensil. And we know that one of the principles for something to be mekabel tumah is that it has to be a kli, it has to be a utensil. If it is not a utensil, it's not mekabel tumah. So Rabbi Eliezer says if a sheretz touches this shoe, which is still on the shoe tree, it's tahar because it's not a utensil. So similarly, Rabbi Eliezer would say it's not a utensil. If it's not a utensil, I'm not allowed to move that shoe on Shabbos, right? The Chachamim, because you're not allowed to move things which are not a utensil on Shabbos. Chachamim say it is tameh. That means they hold it is a utensil. And if it's a utensil, I'm allowed to move a utensil on Shabbos, and therefore I'll be allowed to move this shoe. However, the Gemara asks further. So we had a machlokas earlier, and we had Rava and Abaye. Rava said, and this is the way we rule, that a utensil which is dedicated or designated for prohibited purposes, like a hammer. A hammer is the classic cliche malachul iser. According to Rav, you're allowed to move that hammer whether it is in your way, like you want to sit somewhere, you want to stand somewhere, the hammer's in your way, pick up the hammer, move it out of the way, no problem. Or because you want to use the hammer to like break walnuts or whatever. Shapir. Then this brisa reads very well. Why? Because the brisa is telling us that you have this shoe, the shoe tree or shoe form. The shoe tree, the shoe form. That is something which is a kli malachul iser. It's used to make shoes. Now, Rava says if something which is a kli malachul iser is in your way, you're allowed to move it. So think about this: you have a shoe, and you have this thing that's in it, and it's in your way because I want to get my foot in there. So I'm allowed to move that thing. It's a kli malachul iser. I'm allowed to move it out. Because of the place that it's in. Shapir, it makes a lot of sense. Abai said that a kli malachul iser, a hammer, is only allowed to be used to break nuts, but it's not allowed to be moved for the place that you need it. So Michael Meimer, how are you granted? We now explained, fine. According to the Chachamim, the shoe is a utensil, so therefore it's not muksa. Great, I can move the shoe, but it's stuck on this on the shoe horn, on the shoe tree, on the shoe form, and therefore, how am I allowed to move it out? According to Abaye, it's a kli malachul iser, and litzorach mekomo, for its place. I'm not allowed to move it. So the Gemara answers, talking about skinan, very rough way. We're talking about a case where the shoe is fastened loosely on the shoe form. In such a case, you're allowed to be able to slip it off without actually moving the shoe tree or the shoe form, right? In other words, imagine this is the shoe form, and your shoe is on it, right? So if it's tightly on it, the only way to get it out is you like move them both and you separate it, okay? But then you're moving this and you're moving that. So the shoe we said is utensil, according to the Chamim, no problem. But this is a klish machal iser. According to Rava, you're allowed to move it l'tzorach mekomo because I want to put my foot in here. I'm allowed to move it for its place, no problem. According to Abaye, I need its place, but I can't move a klish machal iser for its place. I can't move a hammer for its place. How's it allowed? So the Gemara says it's loose. If it's loose, then you don't have to move them both. You could just basically take the shoe, right? This is just hanging there. My hand's not here. This is just hanging here loosely. Then I'm able to slip it off. I don't move this at all. That would be the way to learn it. And not only that, we bring a proof to this. The time is on the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im haya rafoi mutter. If it was loose, that's when it's permitted. So now the Gemara is going to say, wait a second. Now we just brought a proof to Abaye. It should be a question on Rava. And that's what Gemara says. Time of the rafoi. The Brisa says that Yehuda only allows it because it's loose. Halo rafoi la. If it's not loose, it would not be allowed. Right? Now this brisa fits very nicely according to Abaye because it says it's only because it's loose and therefore you don't have to move it because it's a klish machal iser. You can't move a klish machal iser. According to Rav, who says that whether you're using it for its place, then you're using it for a usage or for its place, you're allowed to move it. So why does it have to be loose? Even if it's not loose, you should be able to move it. Why is it because it's loose? Even if it's not loose, the answer to the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, who Rabbi Yehuda, Rava says Rabbi Yehuda was really saying his view within Rabbi Eliezer. Who's Rabbi Eliezer? The Rabbi Eliezer we just saw before, who said this shoe typically is not a utensil. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda and says that yes, it's true, a shoe on a shoe tree is not yet a utensil, and typically it's muksa because it's not yet a utensil. But if it's loose, that means that we already see it as its own entity. It's already kind of separate from the shoe tree, and therefore it's already a shoe, and therefore it is a kli. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is coming to teach us. Nothing to do with the movement of the shoe tree. He was going to say, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says normally it's not yet a shoe, it's not yet a utensil. If it's loose, it is already a utensil, and therefore it's not muksa. At tiny, now we support this with the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Im haya rafoi mutter. Rabbi Yehuda is saying this in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. This is in Rabbi Eliezer's view. I'm coming to teach you that if it was loose, it's mutter because then it's already viewed as utensil. Hadron alachtolan. We finished the 20th chapter. We're now going to begin chapter 21. Okay, we're going to talk about carrying. We're going to talk about muksa. Says the Mishnah. A person's allowed to take their son when there's a stone in his son's hand. Okay, so we're talking about carrying right now in a public domain. There's going to be two things we have to discuss. One is carrying. One is also muksa. We're going to start carrying. Similarly, allowed to carry a basket, even when there is a stone in it. Okay. Okay, fine. Sorry. So right now, our Mishnah right now, the Mishnah is going to be focusing on muksa. So the Mishnah again, let's start the Mishnah again. It's focusing on muksa, not carrying, right? Let's you're carrying the place where there's an Erev. You're allowed to carry your son, even though he has a stone in his hand, and a stone is muksa. Similarly, you're allowed to carry a basket, even though there's a stone in it, right? The stone is not muksa. The stone is muksa. The rest of the contents of the basket are not muksa. Truma tameh and tahora. Truma tameh is what? Truma tameh cannot even be eaten by a kohen. What does a kohen do with truma that is tameh? They burn it. They use it as wood, as firewood. Firewood is muksa on Shabbos. So if let's say you have a mix of truma tameh, impure truma, together with truma tahora, you're allowed to move it if it's together. Okay, we'll discuss and analyze this a little bit more soon. Or if it's mixed together with chulin. Now, once we're talking about a mixture of truma, we go on a tangent. What does this mean? Normally we have a rule when it comes to a mixture of non-kosher and kosher that there is bittul. We nullify it 1 in 60. So for example, let's say I have a cholent and a tiny little piece of pork falls into my cholent and it's a big pot of cholent. It's 100% kosher. Why? Because there is 60 times the piece of pork in the cholent and therefore it's fine. When it comes to truma, you need 100. That's what Yehuda says. You're able to remove where if you basically what happens if you have a mixture of truma that falls into non-truma items. So you take out. So let's say there's 100 times the amount of truma that fell in. You just take out one measurement that's equivalent to the truma, and then the whole pile is kosher. Okay, so it says the Gemara. Amar Rava hotzi tinok chai bechis pelutz v'torah. Now we're talking about carrying. Okay, so now the Mishnah says, Rava says, if a person takes a live child to a public domain with a pouch suspended from his neck, chai mishum kis, you're liable on account of taking out a pouch. Tinok meis v'chis taloy lo b'tzavaro pater. If you take out a dead child of the pouch into the public domain, you're entirely exempt. Okay, let's understand this. So says the Gemara, Tino chai v'kis tala lebetvar chai mishum kis v'chai nam mishum tino. The Gemara asks, when you're carrying the live child out, why are you only liable for carrying the bag? You should be liable for carrying the child as well. You just carry the child outside. What's going on? So Rav Nassan Svir leid Amar Chai no says Atmar. Rav holds like Rav Nassan, who says that anything living supports its own weight. Right? Think about this. If you ever carry, if you carry a child when they're sleeping versus when they're awake, you'll notice a big difference, because when they're awake, they're helping them carry themselves. So Rav Nassan holds that in order to be chayiv for carrying, you have to really be doing the carrying. If you're carrying a living being, then we don't call that full-fledged carrying, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv chatas. And that's why you're not chayiv for carrying the child who's alive, because the child is carrying himself. Ask the Gemara, libato kis legavitinok. But okay, so now you said you're only going to be liable for the pouch, but the pouch is something he's wearing. The pouch is something that's like connected to him, so it should be like secondary. It should be seen as an accessory, and if it's an accessory, you should be exempt. Milot stand, we not learn in the Mishnah as a chayva mita. I was taught in the Mishnah that if a person carries a live person in a bed, pater alpha mita, you're exempt even for the bed. Shamita tefillah, because the bed is secondary to the person carrying it. Here too, the kid has a pouch attached to his neck. That should be secondary. So Gemara says no, there's a difference. A bed is considered a classic accessory to a live person because it's servicing the person in that moment. It's helping the person. It's carrying the person. It's like clothing which covers a person. But a pouch, that's secondary. It's an accessory, but it's not servicing the individual. Okay, I want to have a pouch. I want to have like a fanny pack because I want to put stuff in it. But it's not servicing me like a bed is servicing me. Okay, says the Gemara. Now the Gemara goes to the second part of Rava's teaching. Tinok meis v'kis talab is very pater. If a person took out a dead child with a pouch suspended from its neck, you're entirely exempt. There, you should be chai for the child because the child is dead. They're not carrying themselves. So why are you going to be exempt? The Gemara says Rava kirebi Shimon tzvirle. Rava holds like Rav Shimon to Amar kol malacha she'ena tzricha legufa pater aleha. Rav Shimon, we saw this many times before. Okay, we saw this many times before that that malacha shenetzrich lagufa according to Rav Shimon is going to be patra. So what does that mean in regards to carrying? So if let's say I have a watch, okay, so I want to take my watch and I want to give it to you who are outside, and I go outside because I want to give it to you who's outside, then I'm going to be chai because I'm carrying it for the sake of bringing it outside. But let's say my watch is beeping and it's really annoying me, so I'm taking it outside not because I want it outside, I just don't want it here. That's called malacha shenetzrich lagufa. So similarly, when there's a corpse, the typical assumption is it's not that you're taking the corpse out because you want the corpse outside, you just don't want the corpse in the house, and therefore that's something you're going to be exempt from, and that's where Rava holds that if you take a child out who is no longer living, then you're going to be exempt for that reason. Okay, we'll pick up, God willing, tomorrow.